Celia Harrington had it all: power, prestige, and a future carved from legacy, until one stormy night tore her world apart. Betrayed by her own family, framed by a fake scandal, and left with nothing but a torn coat and her name, she was cast out. But from the shadows of shame, she rose with fierce determination, uncovering long-buried secrets and reclaiming everything they tried to steal. Who is Celia really, and how far will she go to take back her legacy? Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to follow the rest of this incredible journey. Celia Harrington's eyes snapped open, her chest rising with frantic breaths as she jolted upright in the dim, unfamiliar hotel room. Her silk dress clung to her body, torn at the shoulder, the hem twisted around her legs. The sheets were rumpled, the air thick with the stale scent of perfume and anxiety. Her heart pounded like war drums in her ears. Panic surged when she realized she wasn't alone. A man lay beside her, still, breathing, utterly unfamiliar. Her breath caught in her throat. She scrambled from the bed, wobbling on unsteady legs as she scanned the room for answers she didn't have. Her mind was foggy, memories blurred, like someone had stolen the last several hours and left behind only confusion and dread. She stumbled into the bathroom, flicking on the light. Her reflection was a stranger. Smeared mascara, lipstick smudged along one cheek, hair tangled in knots, and the sharp tear in her dress exposing her collarbone. Her voice shook as she whispered, "What the hell happened?" No answer came, just the eerie silence of a moment too far gone. A flicker of memory, clinking glasses, laughter too loud, a sharp bitterness in her drink. Her hands trembled as she grabbed her purse, heart thundering, fear thudding in her throat. She didn't look back at the man in the bed. She didn't even ask his name. The New York City air slapped her skin like ice when she rushed outside, clutching the torn dress closed with one hand, heels clicking wildly on the wet pavement. Taxis honked, people moved past her, heads down, indifferent. In the sea of bodies, Celia felt invisible, yet painfully exposed. She turned the corner toward her family's building on Fifth Avenue, the towering Harrington penthouse looming above like a cold monument of control. Relief flickered, a naive whisper that maybe things could be explained. But as she reached the steps, the world shifted again. Her belongings were there, strewn across the sidewalk in the rain. Designer handbags torn open, books soaked, her passport lying face down in a dirty puddle. She froze, a suitcase tipped sideways like a discarded secret. The coat she loved now ruined, caught on the jagged edge of the staircase. And then she saw him, Marcus Harrington, her father. Standing in the doorway in his tailored suit, arms folded, eyes like ice. "You disgraced us, Celia," he growled, his voice slicing through the rain louder than any thunder. "Sleeping your way through contracts? You're no daughter of mine." The words knocked the breath from her lungs. "I didn't do anything," she whispered, but her voice was lost beneath the storm and the sound of her own disbelief. She took a step forward, desperate, drenched to the bone, but then came another blow. Eliza, her half-sister, stepped out of the lobby, Celia's favorite necklace dangling from her fingers like a trophy. "Guess this room's mine now," she smirked, sliding the heirloom into her pocket with venomous satisfaction. Behind her, Vivian Harrington, their stepmother, offered nothing but a sneer. "Get out, you filthy girl. Don't drag our name any lower." Celia's knees gave out. She dropped beside her ruined things, the cold sidewalk soaking through her tights, her hair plastered to her cheeks. The shame burned deeper than the rain. She had once been the golden girl of Harrington real estate, the poised COO, poised to inherit the empire her late mother had built from dust and grit. Now she was a scandal, tossed out into the street like yesterday's garbage. Her fingers closed around her purse, the only thing they hadn't taken, and she forced herself to stand. People passed, some staring, others avoiding her eyes. None stopped, none offered help. She wrapped her arms around her torn coat, the fabric flapping in the wind like some cruel joke. Her heart shattered, but inside it a single ember refused to go out. She wouldn't cry. Not for Marcus, not for Eliza, not even for Vivian. She staggered down the sidewalk, each step fueled by disbelief and a spark of rage. Somewhere deep inside her, a voice rose from the shadows of memory, a voice that sounded like her mother's, whispering the words she needed most: fight. Rain clung to Celia's skin as she wandered without direction, the harsh lights of the city bouncing off wet asphalt and neon signs. Her heels were ruined, her coat soaked through, but none of it mattered. Her world had collapsed in one brutal afternoon. Each step echoed with humiliation. She tried to replay the night before, to grasp any sliver of clarity, but all she could remember was a smile from across the bar, a drink that tasted too sweet, and then nothing but darkness and a cold, unfamiliar room. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag, her last anchor. She ducked into a dingy diner tucked between a dry cleaner and a pawn shop, drawn by the smell of burnt coffee and the flickering neon sign promising warmth. The bell above the door gave a half-hearted jingle as she stepped in. Heads turned. Conversations dropped. Her appearance, ripped dress, tangled hair, eyes swollen from the cold, spoke louder than any introduction. She found a corner booth and slid in, her back against the wall like she was preparing for attack. A waitress wordlessly brought over a chipped mug and poured lukewarm coffee. Celia counted the coins she had, just enough for a drink. It would have to do. She pulled out her phone, fingers trembling. A single message blinked on the screen. It was from Marcus. "Meet Damien Royce tomorrow at 9 a.m. Fix this, or don't bother coming back." Her stomach turned. Damien Royce. His name alone was enough to make her sick. He was a man who circled high-stakes deals like a vulture, offering terms laced with favors, with rumors swirling like smoke. She'd avoided him in the past. Now, her father was sending her into the lion's den, as if her dignity was currency to be traded. She typed out a reply, "I didn't do anything wrong." But she erased it. Marcus wouldn't care. He never did. The bell above the door rang again. She didn't look up until a familiar voice spoke. Quiet, steady. "You look like you could use this." Celia lifted her eyes and found herself staring into the face of the man from the hotel. Nate Cross. He held out a dry jacket, the wool thick and warm, steam rising from the collar. For a moment she froze, unsure whether to run or scream. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. He sat across from her without waiting for permission, his hands open, his expression calm. "Nate, I swear I'm as confused as you are. I woke up in that room just like you. No memory, just chaos." His sweater was worn at the cuffs, his eyes dark with concern but soft around the edges. He didn't seem like a threat, but she'd been wrong about people before. "Why help me?" she asked, her hand still hovering over her coffee like it could defend her. He shrugged. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything." The words settled between them like ash. After a long moment, she reached out and took the jacket. It smelled faintly of cedar, like home. The warmth seeped into her arms, chased away the edge of her shivers. "I have a place," he said gently. "It's small, but you can crash there, just until you figure things out." Pride warred with need. She didn't know him. But the idea of walking back out into the cold, into stares and whispers, into nothing, was unbearable. She nodded. Nate's apartment was on the 4th floor of a brownstone in the East Village. No elevator, no doorman, just creaky stairs and mismatched furniture. It was quiet, humble, safe. He handed her a towel and a blanket and made her tea, filling the silence with small talk about bad coffee and worse landlords. She listened, letting the sound of his voice distract her from her spiraling thoughts. Her hands warmed around the mug, her heart still raw but no longer exposed. She laughed once, something about a stock deal gone wrong and a cat that wouldn't stop jumping on his keyboard. The sound surprised her. She hadn't laughed in what felt like days. "You know," he said with a crooked smile, "we could just get married, solve everything." Celia stared at him, shocked, until he added, "Kidding. Mostly." She shook her head, a smile tugging at her lips. Not a chance. But even as she said it, the idea lingered, absurd, impossible, and yet comforting, as if maybe, just maybe, there was still a way out of this nightmare. Outside, the rain picked up again, but inside Nate's apartment, Celia Harrington finally let her guard slip, if only for a moment. Celia stared at the message on her phone, her stomach knotting. Damien Royce had confirmed the meeting. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. A private table at Veritas, one of those sleek rooftop restaurants where deals were made and souls were sold. She closed her eyes, her fingers curling around the edge of Nate's kitchen counter. The quiet hum of his coffee maker was the only sound in the apartment, but inside her head, everything screamed. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an ultimatum. Damien wasn't just offering to help the company. He wanted control. Over Harrington real estate. Over her. Over the entire narrative. She turned to Nate, who was drying a mug, watching her with that steady calm she had started to rely on too much. "I can't do this," she murmured. "He doesn't want a deal, he wants me." Nate didn't flinch. He just set the mug down and said, "Then we find another way." But there was no other way. Not with Marcus breathing down her neck, not with the media beginning to buzz over the hotel video, not with Eliza smirking from her new seat at the head of the company. At Harrington Enterprises, Eliza walked through Celia's former office like she owned it. Because now, she did. She wore Celia's necklace, flaunted her name, and took pleasure in assigning impossible tasks to the assistants who once answered to her sister. Vivian sipped champagne from a crystal flute in the corner, watching Eliza settle in with a look of pride. Marcus, meanwhile, paced. "This is going too far," he muttered. "She's still my daughter." Vivian rolled her eyes. "And she's still a liability." Eliza chimed in, sliding her phone across the desk. "We're doing what's necessary, Dad." On the screen was a grainy video. Celia in the hotel, her dress slipping off her shoulder, a man's silhouette nearby. The footage was doctored, of course, spliced together from security cameras and creative editing, but it looked real enough to bury her. "It's ready to go viral," Eliza said. "Once it's out, there's no going back." Vivian nodded approvingly. "Let the world see who she really is." Marcus turned away, silent. The next morning, as Celia tried to pull herself together, her phone buzzed again, this time a call from Everett Langston, her mother's oldest friend. "Meet me," he said. "Now." She found him in a quiet park on the Upper West Side, seated on a weathered bench beneath a canopy of autumn leaves. He looked older than she remembered, grayer, warier, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. "You look like her," he said, offering her an envelope. Inside was a photograph of her mother, smiling, radiant, standing beside a man Celia had never seen, and a letter. Her mother's handwriting, delicate, slanted. "She was more than just a CEO," Everett said softly. "She was a Langston, Charles Langston's daughter." "That man in the photo? That's your grandfather." Celia's breath caught. She'd heard the name before. Charles Langston, one of the original titans of New York finance, worth billions, and her bloodline. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" she whispered. Everett hesitated. "To protect you. Your mother didn't want you caught in their world. But now, maybe it's time." Nate was waiting when she returned, his sleeves rolled up, the apartment smelling like cinnamon toast and black coffee. She told him everything. About Charles. About the letter. About the possibility that she wasn't just the daughter of Marcus Harrington, but the heir to something much bigger. Nate listened, then handed her a cup of coffee without saying a word. His silence was never empty. It was space for her to breathe. To decide. Later that day, Celia stood in the grand marble foyer of the Langston estate, a place that looked more like a museum than a home. Charles Langston appeared at the top of the staircase, tall and silver-haired, with eyes that held generations. "Celia," he said, his voice rich and warm, "you're here." She climbed the stairs slowly, every step heavier than the last. He embraced her. She wanted to cry. She didn't. But the reunion soured fast when Margot Langston arrived. Charles's adopted daughter. Poised, impeccable, cold. Her smile was tight as she looked Celia up and down. "Quite the story you're telling," she said, "but let's see if it holds up." Within days, Margot arranged for a DNA test. Celia complied, knowing the truth was on her side. But at the next family dinner, Margot slid a folder across the table with a smug expression. "No match," she said. "She's not a Langston." Celia's heart stopped. Charles's face fell. The room spun. But as Margot smirked and sipped her wine, Celia caught it, a flicker. The kind of nervous glance someone gives when they know they're lying. Her instincts, dulled by betrayal and heartbreak, suddenly snapped awake. Something wasn't right, and for the first time in weeks, Celia felt it. Not fear, not shame, but fire. Quiet, focused, dangerous. She wasn't done, not even close. Celia sat in the dim glow of Nate's apartment, the folder from Margot still clenched in her lap. Her mind refused to accept it. The so-called DNA results, the smug twist of Margot's lips, the way Charles had looked at her with quiet disappointment. No. Something was off. She could feel it like static under her skin. Nate emerged from the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea, setting one gently in front of her. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. Celia didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked up at him, her eyes sharp again. "I need to know the truth." She spent the next 2 days combing through documents Everett had given her. Old letters, legal filings, personal notes scribbled in the margins of her mother's journals. Names appeared, financial ties, a tangled web that connected the Langstons, the Harringtons, and buried secrets no one had dared speak of. With Nate's help, she contacted a trusted lab, one not on Margot's payroll. A quiet tech named Alicia ran new tests on the original samples Everett had kept, stored quietly away from the public eye. The results were clear. Celia was, without question, Charles Langston's granddaughter. And Margot? She had paid for a falsified test to bury her. Armed with proof, Celia returned to the estate. Charles stood alone in the study, sunlight streaking across dusty portraits. She laid the real results on his desk, along with evidence of Margot's payments. Emails, transfer receipts, witness statements. "She tried to erase me," Celia said, her voice calm but firm. "But I'm your blood. You knew it the moment you saw me, just like Mom." Charles picked up the documents with trembling hands. His jaw clenched, eyes glistening. "I let my fear cloud what I knew in my heart," he murmured. "But I see it now. I see her in you." They embraced, this time without hesitation. Behind them, Margot stormed in, voice rising in protest. "You don't know what you're doing. I protected this family." But Charles cut her off. "You lied. You betrayed your own sister." The words struck the air like a slap. "Sister." Margot flinched, but didn't deny it. "I just wanted my place," she whispered. "It was never yours to begin with," Celia replied. "You just borrowed it." Charles turned his back on Margot, walking Celia through the hall lined with her mother's photographs. "You belong here," he said. "This is your legacy." That night, as she sat beside Nate on the old couch that had become her refuge, she told him everything. He listened, silent as always, and when she finally stopped talking, he reached into the drawer beneath the coffee table and pulled out a velvet box. "There's something I've wanted to ask," he said, opening it to reveal a delicate pink sapphire ring. "We got married once for convenience, but I want to do it again. This time for real." Celia stared at the ring, her chest tightening with emotion. "Why?" she asked, barely breathing. Nate's eyes were unwavering. "Because you make me believe in something again. Because you didn't let them break you. Because I love you." Tears burned behind her eyes. The world had taken everything from her. Her name, her home, her reputation. And yet somehow, this man, this stranger she once ran from, had become her anchor. She took the ring, slipping it on her finger with shaking hands. "Then let's build something real," she whispered. The next morning, she filed every document, every email, every shred of evidence Eliza and Damien had tried to hide. She had the fake videos metadata, the payment logs to influencers, the contract tampering documents, and voice recordings from Vivian's bragging phone calls. And she had her fire back. She walked into the Harrington boardroom as if she had never left. Eliza was seated at the head of the table, Vivian at her side, Damien Royce leaning smugly against the window, sipping espresso like a king surveying his land. Celia dropped the folder on the table with a hard thud. "Let's begin, shall we?" she said, flipping open the first page. Gasps rippled through the room as the evidence flashed on screen. Eliza's voice, Eliza's emails, Damien's signatures. Charles entered midway through the meeting, placing a firm hand on Celia's shoulder. "She's not just my granddaughter," he said. "She's the rightful heir to everything Harrington and Langston stood for." Eliza rose in protest, her face red, but no one listened. Damien tried to speak, but Charles raised a hand and silenced him with a glare. The board voted, unanimously. Eliza was removed. Damien's deals were suspended. Vivian left without a word. Celia stood taller than she ever had. The company, her mother's dream, was hers again. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned, and this time she was leading the charge. Celia stepped into her office at Harrington Enterprises, the glass walls gleaming with morning light, the Manhattan skyline stretching out beyond her. It had once been Eliza's seat of power, stolen in the aftermath of lies and betrayal, but now it felt different. Earned. Her mother's portrait hung above the fireplace, serene and proud, watching over her daughter's return. The pink sapphire ring Nate had given her caught the sun as she sifted through files on her desk, preparing for the next phase. The company was still healing from the damage Eliza and Damien had inflicted, but under her leadership, there was finally a sense of direction. She had started new projects, restructuring the firm to reflect the values her mother had always preached: sustainable development, community investment, real partnerships. Investors, once skittish, returned with cautious optimism. Reports began to stabilize. Celia moved with focus, her eyes scanning numbers and projections, her team falling back into rhythm around her. Respect replaced whispers. No one dared mention the video anymore, not after the truth had burned through the gossip. Meanwhile, Eliza sulked in silence, demoted and disgraced, now working as a junior consultant at a third-tier agency in Brooklyn. Her tailored blazers replaced by budget suits, her days filled with cold calls and ignored emails. Vivian vanished from the public eye, retreating to a quiet house in the Hamptons with her social calendar reduced to zero. Damian Royce, exposed for financial manipulation and coercion, was under federal investigation. His empire crumbled faster than he could control. His name had become synonymous with scandal. But Celia's gaze wasn't fixed on the past. She had other things to build. She met weekly with Charles, learning the ropes of Langston Holdings, preparing to take over, not just one legacy, but two. He insisted on hosting a grand gala, a celebration of her reinstatement, of her bloodline, of her future. The Prescott Ballroom was transformed with chandeliers and golden accents, a live quartet warming up in the corner. Celia stood at the top of the stairs in a silver gown, poised and radiant. She felt like herself again. Not the broken woman from the rain-soaked sidewalk, but the woman she was meant to be. When she descended, Charles met her halfway and took her hand, his voice soft with pride. "Your mother would have been thrilled." The words pierced her heart in the best way. The applause that followed as he introduced her as his granddaughter, the heir to the Langston legacy, was thunderous. But Celia's eyes searched the crowd for only one face. Nate stood by the bar, wearing a navy suit that fit him too well for someone who used to joke about cheap coffee and wrinkled sweaters. When their eyes met, he smiled, the kind that reached all the way to his eyes. He walked to her as the music shifted to a waltz, and without a word, she slipped into his arms. They danced under the golden lights, the world fading into the melody. Around them, cameras clicked, socialites whispered, and none of it mattered. Later that night, he led her onto the balcony, the city lights twinkling below like stars had fallen to earth. "You've always been more than them," he said, brushing her hair from her cheek. "More than titles, more than bloodlines." Celia tilted her head, heart beating faster. "Then why do you stay?" she asked, unsure if the words were a challenge or a plea. Nate dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. But this time it was different. No games, no damage control, just love. "Because I want to stay, forever. Marry me, Celia, for real." Her breath caught, not from surprise, but from how right it felt. "Yes," she whispered, laughing through the tears, pulling him into a kiss as applause erupted from behind them. Charles stood in the doorway, clapping softly, his blessing already clear in his smile. Weeks later, the company broke ground on a new tower in Midtown, the Harrington Langston Center for Sustainable Living. A towering symbol of everything Celia had fought for. The press snapped photos as she lifted a shovel beside city officials and investors. Nate stood behind the cameras, hands in his pockets, proud. She caught his eye and winked. That evening, she visited her mother's grave, placing a single white rose on the headstone. "I did it," she whispered, "and I'm still doing it." Nate joined her, his hand finding hers. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The silence between them was full of memory, of triumph, of love. As they walked back through Central Park, the lights of the city guiding their way, Celia knew the battle was over. But her story was just beginning. She wasn't just rebuilding a company. She was redefining what it meant to rise. And this time, no one could take it from her. Sometimes life breaks us in ways we never imagined, through betrayal, through shame, through the kind of loss that leaves us standing in the rain with nothing but our name. But what Celia Harrington's journey reminds us is that even when we're stripped of everything, our worth isn't measured by titles, wealth, or what others think of us. It's measured by how we rise, how we fight, and how we choose to love when it's easier to hate. Celia's story is a powerful reminder that family doesn't always mean loyalty, and blood doesn't guarantee trust, but strength that lives within us, in quiet moments of courage, in standing tall when the world tries to bury us, in believing in our truth even when others try to rewrite it. And most importantly, in holding on to love, not just romantic love, but self-respect, resilience, and legacy. She didn't just reclaim a company, she reclaimed her voice, her identity. And in doing so, she built something stronger, something real. We all face moments when it feels like everything is against us. But like Celia, we can rise. We can rewrite the ending. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. We love hearing your stories from around the world. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own strength, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. There's more to come. More stories of resilience, redemption, and real hope. Because everyone deserves a second chance, including you.